PDF එක නෝන.
Good morning. Thank you, sir. This is the first monetary policy announcement for the year 2022. So, as you are aware, the central banks, the Monetary Board of the Central Bank met yesterday to discuss the current and expected macroeconomic developments. And at this meeting, the Monetary Board decided to increase the policy interest rates by 50 basis points and also to adopt several other policy measures with the view to strengthening the macroeconomic stability. So in that sense, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has adopted further policy measures to strengthen the macroeconomic stability. So if I start discussing the rationale and the background for this policy decision, we observe as the central bank, economic activity is basically picking up, recording a gradual recovery, as we have seen some temporary setback in Q3 as the economy contracted by 1.5%. After that, we have seen some gradual recovery in the economy. So some broad indicators suggest, for example, the Purchasing Managers Index of the central bank and some mobility indicators and some sentiment indices like LMD Nielsen Index suggest that the economy is actually a recovering path and gather. I'm sorry, there's some problem with. Can you look at, please? So with this recovery in the economy and returning to the normalcy, with the successful vaccination drive of the government, we expect that the economy would grow around 4% in 2021, and also continuing the growth momentum, we anticipate that the Sri Lankan economy will expand by a minimum of 5% in 2022. At the same time, we observe a notable improvement in exports. Monthly exports since June 2021 recorded an expansion in terms of reaching USD 1 billion per month. So there has been consecutive increase in exports. As you can see from the left-hand side chart, and some provisional data for December also indicate exports have grown by around 1.2 billion in the month of December. So altogether for the year 2021, the provisional data suggests the exports have recorded USD 12.5 billion 12.5 billion USD for 2021. At the same time, we see tourism sector is gradually picking up, and there is an influx of tourists in the recent months, especially in December. In the month of December alone, we have seen a substantial increase in tourist arrivals. Even in the month of January this year, in the first half, we have seen tourist arrivals of closer to 45,000. So with that, we are basically witnessing a strong recovery in the tourism sector as well. We have seen some slowdown in remittances, especially from the during the latter half of 2021. But with the introduction of special incentive schemes by the central bank, as well as the actions taken by the authorities to curb illegal fund transfers, have generated some renewed interest in routing these remittances through formal channels. So in the month of December, we have seen a pickup in remittances. These are some provisional numbers. Although those numbers are relatively low compared to previous year, there are some positive signs of recovering of the remittances. So for the year 2021, we estimate remittances have, Sri Lanka has received around 5.5 billion USD in terms of remittances. And also on a positive note, we can see since last June, there has been a continuous increase in migrant departures in terms of migrants for work abroad, and that is also picking up and continuing the trend. During 2021, the Sri Lanka rupee has depreciated by around 7% against the USD and has been broadly stable thus far in 2022. And at the same time, the central bank was able to fulfill the timely settlement of ISB USD 500 million on 18th January 2022. And now gross official reserves have reached around 3.1 billion by end 2021. And at the same time, we expect that the materialization of expected foreign inflows especially through bilateral arrangements and other import financing arrangements with our friendly countries would yield some positive results in the period ahead, and that would help us to augment our reserve levels to a healthy position and also to strengthen the external sector going forward. On the monetary side, we have seen a robust performance in credit flows to the private sector. As you can see from the first chart on the left-hand side, there has been a notable expansion in credit flows. Although monthly absolute values change, there has been a kind of a robust increase in credit flows. And we have seen some slowdown in monetary aggregates in the month of November, but that slowdown is entirely accounted for the contraction in net foreign assets of the banking system. So in other words, the domestic credit flows continue to expand during the period that we consider. And also, some matter for concern for us is the notable increase in imports. So imports have been increasing at a rapid pace, especially during last few months of 2021, partly reflecting the impact of international price movements as well as the demand for intermediate goods. We understand the demand for intermediate goods is healthy in terms of economic activity, but at the same time we see a more than expected demand for consumer goods. So as a result, the trade deficit has has expanded in 2021 up to November. From the numbers we can see it has expanded to around 7.1 billion. And the central bank has intervened when necessary to ensure uninterrupted supply of essentials, especially fuel, medicine, and some essential food items during this period. We also observe some continued surge in global commodity prices, and these prices actually impacted global inflation across countries. In many countries, we observe record levels of inflation, including USA, 40 years high inflation, UK, 30 years high inflation. So in that sense, inflation is picking up or has picked up in many countries. So this is mainly driven by some supply side pressures. As you can see from these charts also, oil prices have risen to substantially high levels. For example, from $51 per barrel at the beginning of the year to around $88 per barrel by this year, January 2022. LP gas also, if you look at the numbers from 457 to 719, so almost 100% increase in the gas prices, and also similar in the coal prices. Food prices especially, we see FAO food index has risen to substantially high levels. Mainly milk powder prices have risen. So all these are actually impacting inflation levels across many countries. So same as in Sri Lanka, we see supply side factors remain the key driver of current domestic price pressures. In the month of December, we have seen headline inflation reach double digits. That is after nearly a 12 years period of single digit inflation. So this pickup in inflation, if you look at the blue line, the food inflation has been substantial of around 22%. So there has been a substantial impact from the supply side on our inflation rate. We expect these supply-driven pressures to be transitory or to be muted in the period ahead. But at the same time, we anticipate and we observe there's a possible buildup of demand-driven inflationary pressures. As you can see from the movements of the core inflation has risen to more than 8% by December. So this may compel the central bank to take proactive policy measures, and such proactive policy measures would help rein inflation expectations going forward. And considering these factors, especially the imbalance that we have seen in the external sector in terms of imports, and also the need for ensuring our commitment to price stability, as well as to augment the external sector in terms of attracting more foreign flows, the Monetary Board decided to implement the following measures at yesterday's board meeting. Accordingly, the first policy measure we consider is the increase in policy interest rate by 50 basis points. So with this increase of 50 basis points, the policy rates would be the standing deposit facility rate 5.5%, the standing lending facility rate 6.5%. Accordingly, the bank rate would be adjusted to 9.5%, and the statutory reserve ratio remains unchanged at 4%. In addition, as I mentioned, to preserve the external sector resilience and the stability, we have also decided to implement the following measures. First, to distribute the financing of essential import bills for fuel purchases amongst the licensed banks in broad proportion to their foreign exchange inflows. Second, we also mandate all registered tourist establishments to accept foreign exchange only in respect of their services to non-resident persons. And also in relation to attracting worker remittances, the following measures are implemented. That is to pay an additional 8 rupee per dollar for workers' remittances, in addition to the incentive of $2 per US dollar offered under the incentive scheme on inward worker remittances. This scheme is extended until 30th April 2022. And also the central bank expects to bear the transaction cost borne by Sri Lankan migrant workers when remitting money to Rupee accounts via formal channels, to be reimbursed with effect from 1st of February 2022 through the payment of 1,000 rupee per transaction. And also we implement a measure to pay higher interest rate for both foreign currency and rupee denominated deposits of migrant workers when they are remitting money, and also when they are converted into deposits. And with these measures, we expect, in keeping with our policy stance, we expect there will be a corresponding increase in the interest rates, especially in the deposit rates. We have seen, although the central bank has adjusted policy rates last August, there has been a slow adjustment in the deposit rates. Even from the chart you can see. So we expect the deposit rates would adjust faster, thereby encouraging savings and also discouraging the excessive consumption, which will also have some beneficial impact on the external sector by way of reducing imports. And also we urge financial institutions to swiftly pass on this increase to deposit rates for their customers. And on the other hand, we expect this increase in interest rates in the economy will help the central bank to reduce the treasury bill holding of the central bank through increased market subscriptions. This is in line with the 6-month roadmap we announced last October. And also with the measures implemented towards the external sector, we anticipate the external sector would be strengthened further in the period ahead. Thank you. So let me invite my colleagues, Dr. Padberia, to present in Sinhala briefly, and Ms. Pongotai to brief in Tamil. Thank you.
ස්තුති අයිබෝවන් අද දින ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහා බැංකුවේ මුදල් මණ්ඩලය 2022 වසරට නියමිත වූ පළවෙනි මුදල් ප්‍රතිපත්ති විවරණය ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කළා. එෙහිදී ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහා බැංකුව ආර්ථික ස්ථායීතාවය ශක්තිමත් කිරීම සඳහා තීරණ කිහිපයක්ම ගනු ලැබුවා. ඒ අනුව ප්‍රතිපත්ති පොලි අනුපාතික එනම් නිත්‍ය තැන්පතු පහසුකම් අනුපාතිකයේ 5.5 දක්වාත් නිත්‍ය ණය පහසුකම් අනුපාතිකයේ 6.5 දක්වාත් පදනම් අංක 50කින් ඉහළ නැංවුවා. අනෙකුත් තීරණ විදේශාංශ ශක්තිමත් කිරීම සඳහා ගනු ලැබුවා. මෙම තීරණ සඳහා එළඹෙමිදී ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහා බැංකුවේ මුදල් මණ්ඩලය දැනට පවතින දේශීය මෙන්ම ගෝලීය සාර්වාර්ථික ප්‍රවණතා හා අපේක්ෂිත සාර්වාර්ථික ප්‍රවණතාද සලකා බැලුවා. මම දැන් එම කරුණු ඉතාමත් කෙටියෙන් ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. මුලින්ම අපි ආර්ථික වර්ධනය දෙසට යොමු වෙමු. කොවිඩ් තුන්වන රැල්ල හේතුවෙන් සිදු වූ తాවකාලික පසුබෑම් හේතුවෙන් 2021 වසරේදී ආර්ථිකය 2021 වසරේ තුන්වන කාර්යවේදී ආර්ථිකයේ 1.5කින් පමණ සංකෝචනය වුණා. ඒත් ඊට පස්සේ ඉන් අනතුරුව ආර්ථික ක්‍රියාකාරකම් ක්‍රමයෙන් යථා තත්ත්වයට පත්වෙමින් ඇති බවට ප්‍රධාන ආර්ථික දර්ශක මගින් පෙන්눔 කරනවා. ඉන් අනතුරුව ආර්ථිකයේ ක්‍රියාකාරකම් ක්‍රමයෙන් යථා තත්ත්වයට පත්වෙමින් පවතින බව ප්‍රධාන ආර්ථික දර්ශක මගින් පෙන්눔 කරනවා. මෙහි ආර්ථික දර්ශක කිහිපයක් පෙන්눔 කර තිබෙනවා. ඒ අනුව 2021 වසරේ ආර්ථික වර්ධනය 4% පමණ වන යුතු බවට අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා. ඒත් එක්කම 2022 වසරේ මෙම ආර්ථික පුනර්ජීවනයත් සමග 2022 වසරේදී ආර්ථික වර්ධනය 5% පමණ වන යුතු බවට අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා. දෙදස් විසියක වසරේ ජූනි මාසයේ ඉඳලා අකණ්ඩව මාසික අපනයන ආදායම එක්සත් ජනපද ඩොලර් බිලියන 1ක සීමාව පසු කළා. ඔබට මෙම ප්‍රස්ථාරයෙන් පෙන්눔 කරන පරිදි ඒ අතරම මෑත මාසවලදී සංචාරකයන්ගේ පැමිණීමද ඉතා විශාල වශයෙන් වර්ධනය වුණා. ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් පසුගිය මාස දෙක තුලදී. දෙදස් විසියක වසර අවසාන භාගයේදී විදේශ සේවා නියුක්තිකයන්ගේ ප්‍රේෂණ ලැබීම් තරමක් අඩු වුණත් අපට දැනටමත් ගෙන ඇති ක්‍රියාමාර්ග මෙන්ම අද අපි ගෙන ඇති ක්‍රියාමාර්ග හේතුවෙන් තීරණ හේතුවෙන් ඉදිරියේදී විධිමත් මාර්ග හරහා මුදල් ලැබීම වැඩි වෙනු ඇතැයි අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා. ශ්‍රී ලංකා රුපියල එක්සත් ජනපද ඩොලරයට සාපේක්ෂව 2021 වසරේදී 7%කින් පමණ ප්‍රමාණය වුණා. නමුත් 2022 වසරේ මේ දක්වා කාලය තුල සමස්තයක් ලෙස ඉතාමත් ස්ථාවරව පවතිනවා. 2021 වසර අවසානය වන විට දල නිල සංචිත ප්‍රමාණය එක්සත් ජනපද ඩොලර් බිලියන 3.1ක් මට්ටමේ පවතින බවට ඇස්තිමේන්තු කරලා තිබෙනවා. මෙම දල සංචිත ප්‍රමාණය අප මිත්‍ර රටවල් සමග ද්විපාර්ශ්වික එකඟතා මෙන්ම අනිකුත් මූල්‍යන එකඟතා හේතුවෙන් අපේක්ෂිත විදේශ විනිමය ලැබීම් හේතුවෙන් ඉදිරි කාලය තුලදී ඉහළ මට්ටමක පවතින වෙතයි අපි අපේක්ෂා කරනවා. පෞද්ගලික අංශය වෙත දුන් ණය ප්‍රවාහ අකණ්ඩව වර්ධනය වුණා. යම්කිසි පසුබෑමක් පහුගිය මාස 3කට පමණ පෙර ඇති වුණත් ඉන්පසුව අප දුටුවා අකණ්ඩව වර්ධනය වෙනවා. තවත් රාජ්‍ය අංශය විසින් බැංකු පද්ධතියෙන් ලබාගත් ණයද අකණ්ඩව ඉහළ ගියා. ආනයන වියදමත් වැඩි වුණා. මේ සඳහා බලපෑවා ප්‍රධාන කරුණු කීපයක්ම බලපෑවා. ගෝලීය මිල ගණන් වැඩිවීම, අතරබැඳි භාණ්ඩ සඳහා වන ඉල්ලුම වැඩිවීම, පාරිභෝගික භාණ්ඩ සඳහා අපේක්ෂිත මට්ටමට වඩා වැඩි ඉල්ලුමක් ඇතිවීම මෙන්ම අඩු පොලි අනුපාතයක් පැවතීම නිසා අඩු පිරිවැයක් සහිතව ණය ලබා ගැනීම හැකියාවද ඇති වූ නිසා මෙම ආනයන වැඩිවීමට හේතු වුණා. අත්‍යවශ්‍ය ආනයන සඳහා මහ බැංකුව සැලකිය යුතු විදේශීය විනිමය ප්‍රමාණයක් නිකුත් කරලා තියෙනවා මේ දක්වා. ලෝක වෙළඳපොලේ මිල ගණන් භාණ්ඩවල මිල ගණන් සැලකුම ලෙස වැඩි වුණා. තවමත් වැඩි වෙමින් පවතිනවා. මෙහි ඔබට දකින්න පුළුවන් බොහෝ භාණ්ඩවල මිල ගණන් ලෝක වෙළඳපොලේ වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ සඳහා හේතු කීපයක් බලපාලා තියෙනවා. shipping cost එකත් එහා සම්බන්ධයි. උද්දමනය යම්කිසි ප්‍රමාණයකින් වැඩි වුණා. උද්දමනය වැඩිවීම සඳහා සැපයුම් අංශයේ සාධක ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම හේතු වෙලා තියෙනවා. තවත් ඉල්ලුමන් මගින් නැතිවෙන මිල පීඩන ඇතිවීමේ හැකියාවක්ද පවතින බවට අපි අපේක්ෂා කරනවා. ඒ සඳහා අදගත් තීරණයත් ඒ සඳහා බලපා තිබෙනවා. මෙම කරුණු සලකලා බලලා මුදල් මණ්ඩලය ඊයේ පැවති රැස්වීමේදී ප්‍රධාන ප්‍රතිපත්ති ක්‍රියාමාර්ග කීපයක්ම ගනු ලැබුවා. පළමුවෙන්ම ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහා බැංකුවේ නිත්‍ය තැන්පත් පහසුකම් අනුපාතිකය සහ නිත්‍ය ණය පහසුකම් අනුපාතිකය පදනම් අංක 50ක් බැගින් පිළිවෙලින් 5.5% සහ 6.5% දක්වා ඉහළ නැංගුවා. තවද විදේශාංශය ස්ථාවර කිරීම සඳහා ක්‍රියාමාර්ග කිහිපයක්ම ගනු ලැබුවා. මුලින්ම ඉන්ධන මිලදී ගැනීම සඳහා අත්‍යවශ්‍ය ආනයන බිල්පත් සඳහා වූ මූල්‍යයන් බලපත්‍රලාභී බැංකුව අතර ඔවුන්ගේ විදේශ විනිමය ලැබීම් වලට සමානුපාතිකව බෙදා හැරීමට කටයුතු කිරීමට තීරණය කළා. ඊළඟට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ පිටත පැදිච්ච පුද්ගලයන්ට සපයන ලබන සේවාවන් විදේශ සංචාරකයන්ට ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් සඳහා විදේශ විනිමය පමණක් බාර ගන්නා ලෙස සියලුම ලියාපදිංචි සංචාරක ආයතන වලට අනිවාර්ය කළා. විදේශ සේවා නියුක්තිකයන්ගේ ප්‍රේෂණ සඳහා ඇමරිකන් ජනපද ඩොලරයක් සඳහා රුපියල් 2ක් වන දිරිදීමනාවට අමතරව එක්සත් ජනපද ඩොලරයට රුපියල් 8ක් වූ දිරිදීමනාව 2022 අප්‍රේල් මාස 30 වන දක්වා දීර්ඝ කළා. ඊළඟට 2022 පෙබරවාරි මාස 1 වෙනි දින සිට ක්‍රියාත්මක වන පරිදි විධිමත් ක්‍රම ඔස්සේ රුපියල් ගිණුම් වෙත මුදල් ප්‍රේෂණය කරන ශ්‍රී ලාංකික විදේශිත ශ්‍රමිකයන්ගේ ණය කරනු ලබන ගනුදෙනු පිරිවැය එක් ගනුදෙනුවක් සඳහා රුපියල් 1000ක් බැගින් ප්‍රතිපූර්ණය කිරීමට තීරණය කරනු ලැබුවා. තවද විදේශ ශ්‍රමිකයන්ගේ විදේශ ව්‍යවහාර සහ රුපියල් තැන්පතු සඳහා ඉහළ පොලි අනුපාතයක් හඳුනා දීමටද තීරණය කළා. මෙම තීරණ ඒත සඳහන් කරපු මේ තීරණ මගින් ආර්ථිකය ඇතිවිය හැකි ඉල්ලුම් පීඩන අවම වනු ඇති බවට අපි අපේක්ෂා කරනවා. ඒත් සමගම විදේශාංශයේ පීඩන ලිහිල් කිරීමටද උපකාරී වනු ඇති. මෙම පොලි වැඩිවීම තැන්පත්කරුවන් හට හැකි ඉක්මනින් ලබා දෙන ලෙස අපි මූල්‍ය ආයතන වලින් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා. ඒත් සමගම මෙම පොලි වැඩිවීම නිසා ශ්‍රී ලංකා මහ බැංකුව සතු ඇති භාණ්ඩාගාර බිල්පත් ප්‍රමාණය අඩුවීමක් ඇති වනු ඇතයි කියලා අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ස්තුතියි.
யாவருக்கும் பணிவான காலை வணக்கங்கள். இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கியின் நாணய சபையானது 2022 ஜனவரி 19 அன்று நடைபெற்ற அதன் கூட்டத்தில் தற்போதைய மற்றும் எதிர்பார்க்கப்படும் பேரண்ட பொருளாதார அபிவிருத்திகளை கருத்திற்கொண்டு உறுதிப்பாட்டினை வலுப்படுத்தும் நோக்குடன் இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி மேலும் பல கொள்கை வழிமுறைகளை மேற்கொள்ள தீர்மானித்திருந்தது. இது தொடர்பில் ஓர் தற்காலிக பொருளாதாரத்தை பார்க்கும்போது ஒரு தற்காலிக பின்னடைவினை தொடர்ந்து பொருளாதார நடவடிக்கை என்பது ஒரு படிப்படியான மீழ்ச்சியை பதிவு செய்யும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகிறது. இதற்கேற்ப 2021 3ஆம் காலாண்டில் பொருளாதாரமானது COVID-19 தொடர்பிலான சில இடையூறுகளுக்கு மத்தியில் ஓர் 1.5% சுருக்கத்தினை பதிவு செய்த போதிலும் 2021 பின்னரான காலப்பகுதியில் பொருளாதார நடவடிக்கைகள் என்பன வளர்ச்சியினை பதிவு செய்யும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. இது தொடர்பில் பல குறிகாட்டிகள் இதனை எடுத்து காட்டுகின்றன. இதற்கேற்ப 2021 பொருளாதாரமானது 4% வளர்ச்சியினை பதிவு செய்யும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. அத்துடன் 2022ஆம் ஆண்டில் பொருளாதாரமானது 5% வளர்ச்சியினை பதிவு செய்யும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. தொடர்ந்து 2021 ஜூன் முதல் தொடர்ந்தும் மாதாந்த ஏற்றுமதிகள் என்பன ஐக்கிய அமெரிக்க டாலர் 1 பில்லியனை விஞ்சிய ஓர் செயலாற்றத்தினை பதிவு செய்து அத்துடன் 2021 தற்காலிக தரவுகளின்படி ஏற்றுமதிகள் என்பன ஏறத்தாழ 12.5 பில்லியன் ஐக்கிய அமெரிக்க டாலர் செயலாற்றத்தினை பதிவு செய்திருக்கும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. அத்துடன் அண்மை மாதங்களில் சுற்றுலா பயணிகளின் அதிகரித்த வருகைகள் என்பது சுற்றுலாத்துறை அபிவிருத்திகள் தொடர்பில் நம்பிக்கை ஊட்டுவதாக காணப்படுகின்றன. 2021 பின்னரான காலப்பகுதியில் தொழிலாளர்களின் பணவனுப்பல்கள் ஓரளவு மெதுவடைந்த போதிலும் விசேட சலுகை திட்டங்களின் அறிமுகப்படுத்தல் மற்றும் சட்டவிரோத நிதி மாற்றல்களினை தடுப்பதற்கான அதிகாரிகளின் நடவடிக்கைகள் என்பன முறையான வழிகளில் நிதிகளை கவர்வதற்கு அனுப்புவது தொடர்பில் புதிய ஒரு ஆர்வத்தினை ஏற்படுத்தியுள்ளது. அத்துடன் தொழிலுக்காக வெளிச்செல்வோரின் எண்ணிக்கைகளும் தொடர்ந்து அதிகரித்து வருவது என்பது ஓர் ஊக்கமளிக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு விடயமாக காணப்படுகின்றது. தொடர்ந்து 2021 இலங்கை ரூபாய் என்பது 7% தேய்மானம் அடைந்ததுடன் 2022 இதுவரையான காலப்பகுதியில் பெருமளவில் நிலையாக காணப்பட்டது செலாவணி வீதமானது. 2022 ஜனவரி 18 அன்று இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி நாட்டிற்கான பன்னாட்டு முறைகள் தொடர்பான ஐக்கிய அமெரிக்க டாலர் 500 மில்லியன் தொடர்பிலான தீர்ப்பனவினை உரிய நேரத்திற்கு செலுத்தியுள்ளது என்பது குறிப்பிடத்தக்க ஒரு விடயமாக காணப்படுகின்றது. எதிர்வரும் காலத்தில் இருப்புடைய ஒழுங்குகள் மற்றும் ஏனைய இறக்குமதி நிதியிடல் ஒழுங்குகள் என்பவற்றின் ஊடாக கிடைக்கவுள்ள வெளிநாட்டு செலாவணி உட்பாய்ச்சல்கள் என்பன எதிர்வரும் காலத்தில் மொத்த அலுவல்சார் ஒதுக்குகளை ஒரு திடமான நிலையில் பேணுவதற்கும் பொருளாதாரத்தின் வெளிநாட்டுத் துறையினை வலுவூட்டுவதற்கும் உதவும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. தனியார் துறைக்கான கொடுகடன் பாய்ச்சல்கள் தொடர்ந்தும் விரிவடைந்து காணப்பட்டது. அண்மை காலத்தில் வங்கி தொழில்துறையின் தேறிய வெளிநாட்டு சொத்துக்களின் வீழ்ச்சியினால் அவதானிக்கப்பட்ட மெதுவடைதலுக்கு மத்தியிலும் உள்நாட்டு கொடுகடனின் பாரிய விரிவாக்கத்தினால் விரிந்த பண வளர்ச்சி என்பது 2021 நவம்பர் இறுதியில் உயர்வாகவே காணப்பட்டது. அத்துடன் இறக்குமதிகள் மீதான செலவினம் என்பது கணிசமாக அதிகரித்தது. இது பன்னாட்டு விலைகளின் அதிகரிப்பு, இடைநிலை பொருட்களுக்கான கேள்வியின் அதிகரிப்பு மற்றும் எதிர்பார்த்ததை விட நுகர்வு பொருட்களுக்கான அதிகரித்த கேள்வி என்பவையினாலே ஏற்பட்ட ஓர் அபிவிருத்தியாகும். இது தொடர்பில் அத்தியாவசிய இறக்குமதிகளினை நிதியிடுவதற்கு இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி என்பது தேவைக்கேற்ப இடையீடு செய்தது இதுவரை காலப்பகுதியில். அத்துடன் பண்டங்களின் உலகளாவிய விலைகளின் தொடர்ச்சியான அதிகரிப்பு என்பது எமது பொருளாதாரத்திற்கு ஒரு சார்பற்ற விடயமாக காணப்படுகின்றது. தொடர்ந்தும் பல நாடுகளிலும் இதனாலேயே பணவீக்க மட்டங்கள் என்பன வரலாற்றிலேயே காணப்படாத மட்டங்களில் காணப்படுகின்றன. தற்போது இவ்வகையிலான போக்கினை இலங்கையிலும் நாம் பார்க்கின்றோம். அதாவது பணவீக்கத்திற்கு உள்நாட்டு விலை அழுத்தங்களுக்கு நிரம்பல் பக்க காரணிகள் நான் முன்னர் குறிப்பிட்ட போல் ஒரு முக்கியமான உந்துகோலாக காணப்படும். அதே வேளையில் கேள்விசார் அழுத்தங்களின் சாத்தியமும் காணப்படுகின்றது. இவ்வகையிலான நிரம்பல் பக்க அழுத்தங்கள் என்பன தற்காலிகமானவையாகவே இருக்கும் என்பதுடன் தொடர்ந்தும் இது தொடர்பில் இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி கண்காணித்து வருவதுடன் இதன் தொடர்பிலான முன்னெச்சரிக்கையான நடவடிக்கைகளை மேற்கொள்வதற்கு இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி தயாராக உள்ளது. இந்த அபிவிருத்திகளின் மத்தியில் நேற்றைய தினம் நாணய சபையினால் தீர்மானிக்கப்பட்ட நாணய மற்றும் ஏனைய கொள்கை வழிமுறைகள் பேரண்ட பொருளாதார உறுதிப்பாட்டினை வலுப்படுத்தும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றன. இந்த வழிமுறைகளானவை மத்திய வங்கியின் துணைநில் வைப்பு வசதி வீதத்தினையும் துணைநில் கடன் வழங்கல் வசதி வீதத்தினையும் முறையே 5.5%க்கும் 6.5%க்கும் ஒவ்வொன்றையும் 50 அடிப்படை புள்ளிகளினால் அதிகரித்தது. அத்துடன் வங்கி வீதமும் 9.5% அதிகரிக்கப்பட்டது. அதற்கு அப்பால் எரிபொருள் கொள்வனவுகளுக்காக அத்தியாவசிய இறக்குமதி பட்டியல்களின் நிதியிடலை உரிமம் பெற்ற வங்கிகளின் வெளிநாட்டு செலாவணி உட்பாய்ச்சல்களின் அடிப்படையிலான விகிதாசாரத்தின் அடிப்படையில் அவ்வங்கிகளுக்கு இடையில் பகிர்ந்தளிக்கப்பட உள்ளது. இலங்கைக்கு வெளியில் வதிக்கின்ற ஆட்களுக்கு வழங்கப்படும் பணிகள் தொடர்பில் வெளிநாட்டு செலாவணியை மாத்திரம் ஏற்றுக்கொள்வதற்கு அனைத்து பதிவு செய்யப்பட்ட சுற்றுலா பயணி நிறுவனங்களுக்கும் அதிகாரம் அளிக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது. இறுதியாக தொழிலாளர் பணவனுப்பல்கள் தொடர்பிலான சில ஏனைய வழிமுறைகள் அறிவிக்கப்பட்டுள்ளன. அதாவது உள்முக தொழிலாளர் பணவனுப்பல்கள் மீதான ஊக்குவிப்பு திட்டத்தின் கீழ் ஐக்கிய அமெரிக்க டாலர் ஒன்றிற்கு வழங்கப்படும் ரூபாய் 2 ஊக்குவிப்பு தொகைக்கு மேலதிகமாக தொழிலாளர் பணவனுப்பல்களுக்காக கொடுப்பனவு செய்யப்படும் ஐக்கிய அமெரிக்க டாலர் ஒன்றிற்கு மேலதிகமாக ரூபாய் 8 கொடுப்பனவை ஆக மொத்தத்தில் ரூபாய் 10 கொடுப்பனவை 2022 ஏப்ரல் வரையில் இந்த சலுகை நீடிக்கப்பட்டது. அத்துடன் 2022 பிப்ரவரி 1 தொடக்கம் நடைமுறைக்கு வரும் வகையில் உரிமம் பெற்ற வங்கிகள் அத்துடன் ஏனைய முறைசார் வழிகளூடாக ரூபாய் கணக்குகளுக்கு பணம் அனுப்பப்படுகின்ற போது பரிமாற்றல் ஒன்றிற்கு, அதாவது ஒரு டிரான்சாக்ஷன் ரூபாய் 1000 கொடுப்பனவு செய்வதன் மூலம் புலம்பெயர் இலங்கை தொழிலாளர்களுக்கு ஏற்படும் பண பரிமாற்ற செலவினை மீளளிக்க இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி தீர்மானித்துள்ளது. அத்துடன் புலம்பெயர் தொழிலாளர்களின் வெளிநாட்டு நாணய மற்றும் ரூபாய் பெயர் குறிப்பிட்ட வைப்புகள் இரண்டிற்கும் உயர்வான வட்டி வீதங்களை அறிமுகப்படுத்தும் இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி. அதன் கொள்கை நிலைப்பாட்டிற்கு இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கியின் கொள்கை நிலைப்பாட்டிற்கு ஏற்ப குறிப்பாக வைப்பு வீதங்கள் தொடர்பில் வட்டி வீதங்களில் ஒரு பொருத்தமான உயர்வினை எதிர்பார்க்கிறது. இதன் மூலம் சேமிப்புகள் ஊக்குவிக்கப்படுவதுடன் அதிகமான நுகர்வினையும் அதனை விளைவிக்கும் எரிபொருள் இறக்குமதிகளினையும் மட்டுப்படுத்தப்படும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. இந்த அதிகரிப்பினை அதாவது இந்த வட்டிகளின் அதிகரிப்பினை நிதியியல் நிறுவனங்கள் நுகர்வோருக்கு விரைவாக வழங்க வேண்டும் என இலங்கை மத்திய வங்கி வேண்டுகின்றது. அத்துடன் சந்தை வட்டி வீதங்களில் எதிர்பார்க்கப்படும் திருத்தம் என்பது அதிகரித்த சந்தை கோரல்களினூடாக மத்திய வங்கியின் திரைசேரி உண்டியல் வைப்பினை குறைப்பதற்கு உதவும் என எதிர்பார்க்கப்படுகின்றது. இந்த வழிமுறை என்பது சென்ற ஆண்டில் அறிவிக்கப்பட்ட 6 மாத வழிகாட்டலுக்கு அமைவானதாக காணப்படுகின்றது. நன்றி.
The central bank decided that we would once again, after a period of about 5 months, that the policy rate would be increased, mainly because we want to give a very clear message that we would want to see the inflation being dealt with, and also to give a message that the external sector needs to be stabilized further. We have taken certain measures, and those are the ones that have been described by the Economic Research Division. And if there is anyone who wishes to ask any questions, the time would be now. අපි මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ප්‍රතිපත්ති පොලි අනුපාතය වැඩි කර බව දැනටමත් අපේ ආර්ථික පර්යේෂණ දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවෙන් දැනුම් දීලා තිබෙනවා. ඒ සමගම අපි මීට පෙර පොලි අනුපාත වැඩි කරපු වෙලාව තමයි අගෝස්තු මාසයේ ගිය අවුරුද්දේ. දැන් නැවත වරක් අපිට උද්දමනය යම් ආකාරයකින් වැඩිවීමක් පිරෙන ගමන්ම විදේශාංශයේත් තවදුරටත් ශක්තිමත් කිරීම සඳහා අපි විවිධ ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය තීරණ අරන් තිනවා. ඒවා පිළිබඳව දැන් විස්තරයක් ඔබතුමාලාට කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව යම් ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබෙනවා නම් ඒක ඔබතුමාලාට අහන්න පුළුවන් දැන්.
Mr. Kapral, Governor, how was the 500 million US dollars for ISB? How was it paid? Did we pay it from our reserves?
Every payment is made by the reserves. And then with the inflows that we receive. So it is from the reserves we allocate the funds as and when the payments, not only for ISBs, for every single payment for the debt of the government is paid the same way.
If I may ask one more
Any
question.
other questions? Yes.
What steps have been taken to address the dollar shortage in the country, Governor? How will we raise the money to purchase essential goods and fuel?
If you see one item of our policy measures, we have reached an agreement with the licensed commercial banks that they too would be bearing the financing and the arrangement of the financing of certain essential goods, so that essential goods are not only put as a burden to the state banks. So it will be in proportionate to the dollar earnings as well as the dollar incomes that they receive. We would be negotiating with them, and they will be taking a part of those bills as well, so that there will be a greater stability in the overall external sector. Yes.
On this question of foreigners having to pay in foreign currency,
I can't hear you, Amal.
foreigners being required to pay in foreign currency, how would it be implemented practically?
We would ask them to either pay with the credit card, or they would be paying at the time of checkout, they would be paying in the currency of a foreign nation. If they encash, then they would have had to go to an authorized dealer, encash, and they would have a receipt, and they can show the receipt for that value that they have that they have actually encashed at an authorized dealer. Naturally.
Governor, given that the central bank has earlier announced a band of 4 to 6% for inflation, and given the current sort of data, has the central bank considered revising that band and perhaps increasing it to better reflect the current situation?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge that all central banks as well as authorities all over the world have been grappling with in the recent past. As was announced by Dr. Anil Pereira, US as well as UK, all those countries are experiencing the highest inflation rates that they have experienced in the last 40 to 30 years. So which means that most of them who had these kinds of bans as well as targets, they have found that those targets have been disturbed mainly because of the global conditions. As our direct economic research showed you, some of the items have gone up in value. Coal, LP gas, crude oil, milk powder, foodstuffs, all have gone up by 50, 60, sometimes even 3 times the earlier price that was prevailing 1 year ago. So we have had to face that challenge all over the world, and as a result, our bans also have been disturbed, but we would want to get back to that as fast as possible. That's why all are making efforts to ensure that we get back to our normal position as fast as possible.
So, but Governor, if I may ask a follow-up, what is sort of your expectation in terms of inflation?
Sorry?
What is your expectation in terms of inflation? I mean, the 4 to 6 band seems unrealistic. So are you looking at 8%, 10%? Where would you like to see?
What we would say is that these rates that are prevailing today are not rates that we would like to see happening for too long. So we are of the view that it is temporary, as many central banks all over the world have mentioned, that they also believe that there would be a sharp reduction in these prices worldwide. And if that were to happen, if the oil prices, the gas prices, the milk food prices, as well as so many other prices of commodities decline, that would affect our own inflation numbers as well. And at that stage, we would find that we are getting back to the earlier numbers that we were used to. So that's the way that we are approaching it, because right now we are to some extent grappling with world prices over which we have no control.
Understandable. So, you haven't thought of a new number?
I can think of a new number. I'll mention that when we are ready to mention.
Right, thank you.
Governor, what is the current reserve position after bond settlement? Because there was a controversy about the usability of a Chinese swap.
The Chinese swap is within our range of products as well as currencies, and we have taken that into our reserves quite naturally. It is used for all purposes that we would like to use it for. But at the moment, the reserve numbers, we announce it once a month, and it will be there at the end of this month in our weekly indicators.
What is the expected inflows and outflows this year?
Sorry?
Expected inflows and outflows.
Whatever the inflows and outflows are, we will be settling the debts.
Governor, whatever the 10 rupee and the 2 rupee extra, who's paying it, and so far how much has been paid?
2 rupees will be paid by the government, 8 rupees will be paid by the central bank.
How much have you paid so far? So you will reimburse it from the government, is it? Like
Sorry?
you pay it and they reimburse it?
We will claim it from the government.
From offsetting against profits or something?
Possibly.
So 10 rupees you pay, right?
10 rupees we are paying, so that the total is the amount that is needed to be paid to the person who is who is receiving the remittance. Thereafter, we will do a transaction between the government and the central bank where we would claim 2 rupees from them and absorb the 8 rupees.
Any numbers on the amount?
We'll report those numbers shortly, Asanta.
So two questions on the bonds. Are there any, on our bonds, are there any collective action clauses? And B, now if are there any, to your knowledge, any cross-default clauses in any other contracts? Because some people are asking for default. So are there any
Cross-default doesn't arise because we have not defaulted.
You know, I mean, do you have...
I think that should have been also considered by some of these people who were recommending default.
Yeah, so do you have done a survey on to see whether there are some things like that in private contracts and also for other government loans and, you know...
All these are vetted by the Attorney General as well. And when it is being entered into, these are international norms that we follow. So I believe different loan agreements will have different clauses. I won't be able to tell you exactly which loan has which clauses, but overall, no such occurrence is contemplated. And therefore, we won't need to be worrying about a cross default now if you're not defaulting.
But do you know about the collective action clauses? Are they there in our bonds?
I'm not sure, but I can check that up and tell you. I can't hear you, just take the mic.
The 1,000 rupee remitter incentive per transaction, will that cost be borne by you or by the government?
It will be borne by the central bank.
What is the status of the Qatar swap?
These swap arrangements that we are discussing will be announced at the time that those materialize. At the moment, we are in radio silence as far as those discussions are concerned. Those will be announced in due course. Whichever country that we are having swap arrangements will be announced at the time that we have completed the negotiations with the respective country.
Governor, on these transactions, can we get an idea of how many transactions per month? And what's your kind of forecast? Because you're coming every month, there's new initiative to boost remittances, worker remittances. Is it because previous efforts have sort of not realized your bit? And what is your forecast for this year?
The different strategies that were implemented are all working, and when we get further ideas, even if you give us a good idea, we might be humble enough to implement. because we think that it is necessary for us to explore all avenues. And if there are different ways in which some people are not adhering to the law, we have to take action there as well. And if we have to give more incentives, and those incentives are sufficient for us to get additional funds to come in, we will explore those as well. Make a gun. Microphone. Microphone.
පිළිගන්න කැමතියි කියලා රජයේ මේ නිමල් සිරිපාල මහත්මයා කියලා තිබ්බ 240ක් දෙන යෝජනා කරනවා කියලා මම දන්නේ මහ බැංකුවට එතුමා ඒ යෝජනාව සිද්ධ කළාද කියලා. ඒතර අර ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ මහ බැංකුව ගොඩාක් දිරිගැන්වීම් යෝජනා හඳුන්වලා දුන්නත් විදේශගත ශ්‍රමිකයෝ කියන්නේ ඒක අර අවිධිමත් වෙළඳ පොලෙන් ලැබෙන රේට් එකත් එක්ක ප්‍රමාණවත් නෑ කියන කතාවක් ඒ පැත්තෙන් ඇහෙනවා. එතකොට 240ක් දෙන්න කියලා රජයේ ඇමතිවරයෙක්ම ප්‍රකාශ කරනවා. මහ බැංකුවේ ස්ථාවරය මොකද්ද රුපියල් 10 මදි කියලා කියනවා ඒ පැත්තෙන්.
ඔය ඉතින් විවිධ අයට විවිධ යෝජනා කරන්න පුළුවන්. මම කිව්වේ අපි මේ යෝජනා පිළිගත්තම තමයි අපි ඒවා ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නේ. පිළිගත්තේ නැත්නම් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් ඒකෙන් තේරෙන්නේ මේ යෝජනාව අපි පිළිඅරගෙන නැති බවයි. මෙතනදී අපි බලන්නට අවශ්‍යයි සෑම පැත්තකින්ම මේ යෝජනාවල තිබෙන ප්‍රායෝගිකත්වය. ඒක අපි කිරීමෙන් අපිට විවිධ පැතිවලට වෙන අනිත් බලපෑම් ඒවා සියලු දේවල්ම බලලා තමයි තීරණයක් ගන්නෙ. ඒ නිසා සමහරක් යෝජනා මතු පිටින් හොඳ ආකර්ෂණවත් උනායි කියලා කිව්වත් සමහර විට අපි ඒවා නොගැනෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙන හේතු නිසා.
How much did garment exports bring us last year?
About 6 billion, garment exports. Garment exports would have an export figure, and there would be also an import figure that would be the cost of the items that were purchased in order to make the export. Then there would also be other expenses like courier services as well as others. We will give you a rough outline for the time being. Sorry? 5 point. And the imports? I think about 3 billion, no? Sharp? Earlier one, 5 point? It was about 5.5 billion, of which about 3 billion has been imports, so it's about a net 2.5 billion.
ඒ වගේම ගවන මේනකොට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය ආහාර ද්‍රව්‍ය සහ ඒ වගේම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ මේනකොට වරාය හිර වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක සිමෙන්ති ආනයනකරුවෝ සහ ඒ වගේම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය ආහාර ආනයනකරුවන්ගේ කිරිපිටි ආනයනකරුවන්ගේ සංගම වල කියනවා මේවා ගන්න ඩොලර්ස් නැහැ කියලා. ඒතර ඔබතුමා කොහොමද කියන්නේ මේ ඩොලර්ස් අරුබුදය ගැන?
නෑ මේ අපි ඒක විග්‍රහ කරලා බැලුවම අපි දැනගත්ත සමහරක් කන්ටේනර්ස් හිර වෙලා තියෙන්නේ වෙනත් හේතු නිසා. එතකොට මුදල් අවශ්‍ය වීම නිසා හිර වෙච්ච සීලුම කන්ටේනර්ස් අපි නිදහස් කරන්නට වැඩිපුර ඩොලර්ස් දීලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මම හිතන්නේ මේ ගැටලුව දැන් මේ බලපාන්නේ නැහැ. ඒත් එක්කම කිරිපිටි හිඟයක් මීට පෙර තිබුණේ කිරිපිටි වල මිල වැඩි කරන්නට බැරි නිසා ඒ අය සමහරක් අය ආනයන නොකර හිටියා. ඉතින් දැන් මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ දැන් විසඳලා තියෙන්නේ. මම හිතන්නේ දැන් අඩුපාඩුවක් නැතුව ඒ අද්‍රව්‍ය රටට ඒවි.
ඊයේ දිනේද ඩොලර් නිකුත් කරාද බැංකුවේද කොහොමද?
ඊයේ දිනේත් ඊට ඉස්සරනොත් නිකුත් කරලා තියෙනවා.
Government on this private licensed bank bearing some of the private banks by bearing some of the fuel purchase bills. How much do you expect from the licensed bank?
We believe that there would be a certain portion that should be also financed through those banks because they receive the dollars coming in, and before items which are not of a absolutely essential nature, it is necessary for us to ensure that the essential items are first imported. Because last year we saw that $21.5 billion worth of items were imported. So that is a comfortable number to have accommodated the essentials. So the fact that there was some concern about essentials means that before the essentials were met, non-essentials were also being imported. If you go to some of the supermarkets, you will probably see some items which are not absolutely essential, but oil is. at the same time, coal is in order to generate electricity. So what we are doing is we have had a discussion with the bankers as well, and we have reached agreement where they also will take a part of the essential items, so that we don't only provide that to the two state banks, so that all will take part of it, so that the essentials are thereafter given first priority. After that, the others can be imported.
Any rough idea how much, Governor?
It will be about, out of the total export earnings, as well as the remittances and services exports, all of that, it will be about 1/3. So it's a very comfortable margin.
So if suppose if one bank has, I mean, there is no demand from them, like say 1/3 of their dollar earnings or whatever they have is not demanded by this fuel purchase, what's going to happen then?
Sorry?
What's going to happen?
No, we will ask them to take that first part as a priority to be financed, so that they will also have play their part in this whole national endeavor. Because we don't want to see a situation where we have to struggle for essentials, but all the non-essentials are there. I don't think anyone of you all would like to see that happening. First of all, we got to ensure that the essentials are also provided for.
So with your permission, actually it's part of their import business. And this is not for at a discount rate or whatever. Now, I mean, if they open an LC, they will apply the same condition as if were that they are going to apply for any other private investor, private importer. So basically, it's a diversification of a business concentrated to among two state banks, among a larger business community.
No, my question was, Governor, say suppose one bank can afford something like $400 million, whereas CPC or whoever who imports fuel have only accessed them for $200 million. So what's going to happen to
But there are other essentials also, no? We took this item as fuel because that is one of the largest chunks. But if the fuel bill comes down drastically to $17, then like what happened some time ago, then there may be space for some other imports also to be accommodated.
Governor, something the banks,
but that's very unlikely.
Something the banks have told is that even when they are trying to give this money for food or fuel, or even for people who import inputs for export, there's no actual, like even 5 items for them to actually prioritize. There's no issued priority list. Even for export product input. So
export,
for food or fuel or for products that people import for export, that is not exporters. Other people who import things, they are also some can't get dollars. But the banks are generally say that they try to give priority, but there's no official priority to give. So is it possible to, now you are saying oil has been officially given priority, is it? They have been told.
Yeah, what will happen is, Asantha, when you take a big item out of the equation, there will be sufficient liquidity in the market. So that's why we are taking that one big item out. Then the rest of it, they can manage without too much of any other essential item being threatened.
So this, when somebody opens an LC and it comes due, everybody has to chip in and finish it.
No, we are talking to the banks, and then we'll work out a formula so that it will be fair to everyone, and at the same time making sure that the essential oil as well as the other essential items are covered in that plan.
So the ships that are there, you have given, right? Central Bank gave.
We have given some have been met by the banks themselves.
The ones that are the ships that are there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Nista.
Previously also you were talking about 20.
Can you start from the beginning?
Yeah. No, you mentioned about 20 billion plus imports done last year. Despite you imposing restrictions, UN Import Control Exchange as well, are you having a official list of essential items where banks needs to give priority? And we do make that list public as well?
Actually, we have not placed any restrictions other than for vehicles and some other items like tiles for which the restrictions were placed for different reasons, and gold. The rest of it have been all allowed. So that's why we see that some excess imports, if I may use that word, have been taking place in certain items which may not be considered to be essentials. But as a result of which, some of the essential items were in that list where people had to come and say our containers are stuck. So what we are trying to do is, first of all, to make sure that the imports are done for the essential items before we shift to the others. So once that is done, like the foodstuffs, the gas, the coal, and medicine, and medical and pharmaceuticals, and oil, the rest of it, once you take the big items out, the rest of it can manage on their own. And then if one or two non-essential items are not coming at the same numbers as people were used to, well, that may be something that we can live with without too much difficulty.
No, understood, but are you coming with a list of items so that there is more transparency as to in terms of priority?
No, people can import whatever they want, they can, but first of all, we have to import the ones that everyone needs. So I think there is no, we don't need to spell it out too clearly, more than what we have done, because it's very clear that these essential items, we first of all import, and thereafter people can import anything else without first importing everything else and then saying we have no dollars for the essentials.
And give ceilings vis-a-vis volumes that could be imported. For example, if it is chocolates, you could say only X kilos of chocolates could be imported per annum or something like that. So then you are being very absolute. I mean,
We'll consider that, Panita.
Governor, there's still a school of thought, there's still stakeholders who continue to call for restructuring. What is sort of your view on that?
Last time also I explained that what we are doing is what lots of people who have to adjust their portfolios are doing. Sometimes you call it restructuring, but when we told you that we are having the payments of our bonds made with other inflows, what does that mean? That is a restructuring, because we have settled one loan. Earlier, what lots of people believe is that restructuring means you have to stop paying and you default. Then you have to ask the creditors to take a haircut. But if you ask any accountant who is advising the banks, every day restructuring occurs when you take one loan from a different bank, which is at a lower price, and you settle one of the other loans that you have to settle. That's also restructuring. If you take a loan from one bank where you are taking for 10 years and you are settling the loan which is for 5 years, that's also restructuring. So restructuring sometimes is being looked at as something painful, and if it is not painful, people think that it is not restructuring. They think it has to be painful, it has to put the creditor into trouble, it has to ensure that a foreigner has to come and advise, and it has to be done by some institution globally, and then will it be restructuring. But people do that all the time. If you go to any bank, you will find that all the banks do that every day, where loans are restructured. That doesn't mean that the bank says, I don't want my money. But you still have an arrangement where you change it. So if you have new inflows, you can change that. So that's what is meant by restructuring.
Because inputs from experts are not being taken into account given the scale of this crisis today. But are you all thinking of getting all, irrespective of political lines, to form a broad expertise committee and entrust some reforms?
Yes, now you're talking about experts. At the central bank, we have 25 PhDs. We have more than 350 people within these ranks, within this building, who are masters, who have master's degrees, who have been at the best universities in the world, and they have had professional qualifications as well. professional qualifications, we have more than 250 persons here. So I think that's a vast talent that we have. So we sometimes think in order to get expert, we have to get someone from abroad and then only he's an expert. Or we think that some other person who has been on the television and giving speeches, that is the expert. But there are a lot of silent experts who are working here. Please understand that. And we rely on them. We appreciate their services. We look at them to provide us with the guidance. Monetary Board is being advised by all these people. We have more than 870 people who are qualified in this establishment. We also have those people who are not only qualified, they have been trained at the state expense and they are serving this country for a period of time, all because the central bank itself has provided them with scholarships to do that. So I think after doing all that investment, if you still have to get from somewhere else because people have this still mentality, I think it's time to shed that.
I'm referring not foreign, because if we can go beyond here is highly.
We have also, I forgot to mention, thank you for remind me, we have two committees. One is the Monetary Policy Consultative Committee, where the best brains as well as very competent people in this country have been invited to provide advice to the Monetary Board. Now this document that you just saw has also been given the input from these gentlemen and ladies. We also have a Financial System Stability Consultative Committee, again made up of the private sector. They are also giving us advice. We take those advices very seriously. So I think in these conditions, we have to also appreciate that it's not that we are formulating this policy in a vacuum. There is a lot of discussion that goes into this into these decisions. So I think if somebody wishes to still provide us with advice, they may do so. But there is also the need to ensure that we don't discount the advice that we receive internally as well.
Yeah, but don't you think that industry-wise, industry-based experts, because academics alone will not be able to see things beyond horizon. So if you have industry people who are having their feet on it, for example, now the fisher folk say that people take decisions behind closed doors, knowing nothing about the seas. So like that, people who have more practical insights.
Yeah, we are certainly happy to receive advice, but we have to also appreciate that we have to be conscious as to what advice that we have to talk about. We have to also think that we are dealing with macroeconomy. When you're dealing with the macroeconomy, we have to see all sections. Yes, the fisheries sector is a very important sector. Yes, the industrial sector is a very important sector. Services sector is also important. Tourism sector is important. We have discussions with them. But that doesn't mean that we may have reached out to every single person. So they also have their bodies. We talk to them. We have other associations also who communicate with us regularly. The OPA communicates with us. The Institute of Chartered Accountants talks to us. We have various other industry experts who talk to us. So I think there is a fair amount of interaction as well. But at the same time, at some stage a decision has to be made. So when the decision is made, it is communicated as well. Sorry?
Any steps which you plan to take to alleviate our credit ratings?
Now you talk about the credit rating. I think after all the credit rating agencies were predicting that we will default, what did we do yesterday? We paid. So we have actually proved them to be who have made statements which are not true.
Governor, විදේශිකින්ගේ ගෙවීම් විදේශ මුදලින් කරන්න ඕන කියලා අනිවාර්ය කිරීමක් තියෙනවා.
මොකද?
විදේශ මුදලින් කරන්න ඕන කියන අනිවාර්ය කිරීමක්. එතනදී ඒවා උපයා ගන්න ආයතන, හෝටල් හෝ සංචාරක නියෝජිත ආයතන මේක අනාවරණය කළ යුතුයිද කොපමණ ප්‍රමාණයක්?
අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම කරන්නට අවශ්‍යයි. ඒ අය දින දෙකකින් හරි තුනකින් හරි ඒක බැංකුව වල තැන්පත් කරන්නට අවශ්‍යයි. එතකොට ඒ තුලින් ඒ අපේ සිස්ටම් එකට පද්ධතියට එකතු වෙනවා.
දෙසැම්බර් මාසයේ සංචාරක ඊවීම් කොච්චරද කියලා තියෙනවද ඉලක්කම?
දෙසැම්බර් මාසයේ සංචාරකයන් කියලා.
සංචාරකයෝ ලක්ෂයකට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් දෙසැම්බර් ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා.
ඉපයීම කොච්චරක්?
ඉපයීම් අපිට ඒ කියන්නේ අවුරුද්දටම ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඩොලර් මිලියන 200ක් විතර තමයි ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒකෙන් වැඩිම ප්‍රෝෂන් එක දෙසැම්බර් මාසේ ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ. අවුරුද්දම ගත්තොත් සංචාරක පැමිණීම් 1,94,000ක් විතර තියෙනවා.
We may have time for another 2 questions. Yes.
Governor, there's a bit of speculation in the market and among investors that the rupee will depreciate. Could you comment on that? And if so, when and by how much?
It won't depreciate.
Can we have the year end and the November end and December end treasury bill stock inclusive of the repo overnight?
I'm sorry?
The end December and end November treasury bill stock inclusive of repo?
I think that information will be there in our weekly indicators.
It's not there.
Huh? No.
I think it's available on a daily basis, published in the open market operations press release published by the domestic operations
No,
department.
that's only the permanent stock. Your overnight repo number doesn't come.
Then
Dr. Harishan,
we'll-
එක ප්‍රශ්නද
Okay, last.
දැන් තෙල් ගෙනීමට මේ වෙනකොට දැන් දින 8කට පමණයි මේ වෙනකොට තෙල් ගෙනීමට තෙල් ගෙනලා තියෙන්නේ. මෙම ප්‍රමාණයට ඉදිරියේදී කොහොමද ඩොලර් ලබා දෙන්නේ?
ඔබතුමාගේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට මම ඇත්තටම කැමතියි. ඔබතුමාට මතක ඇති 2007 8 9 කාලයේදී අපි ලොකු යුද්ධයක් කළා. සමහර දිනවල තිබුණා ආයුධ නැති දිනත්. සමහර දින තිබුණා මේ වතුර නැති දිනවල. අපි ඇවිල්ලා හැමදාම ටෙලිවිෂන් එකට කිව්වේ නැහැ. එහෙම කිව්වා නම් LTT එක ගහලා මේ එදාම. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා දවස් 8කට තියනවා කියලා කියනකොට ඊළඟ දවසේ අපිට තවත් ඒ කරුණු තියෙනවා කරගන්න ඒකට. අපි කරයි ඒක. මොකද සමහරකට තෙල් ගවඩා කරන්න බෑ දවස් 80කට. තියන්න තැනකුත් නැහැ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒක ඩයිනමික් ඔපරේෂන් එකක්. ඉතින් එහෙම වෙනකොට සමහරක් සමහරක් අවස්ථාවලදී ඒක දවස් 2කින් යයි, දවස් 3කින් යයි, 4කින් යයි. දැන් මේ රටේ වෙලා තියෙන හැමදාම ඔක්කොමලා ස්පෙකියුලේට් කරනවා. කන්න තියෙන්නේ මේ දවස් 3ද, තෙල් තියෙන දවස් 8ද, විදුලිය තියෙන දවස් 4ද. ඒක අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. රජයේ වගකීම තමයි ඒවා ලබා දෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒවා ලබා දෙයි. ඉතින් සමහර කාලට දවස් 8කට තෙල් ගත්තට පස්සේ පස්වෙනි දවසේ තවත් තෙල් දවස් 8කට ගනි. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ තමයි කටයුතු සිදු වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒකට වැඩි කලබල වෙන්නේ නැතුව ඉන්න ඕනේ.
දැන් මේ අර්බුදය නිසා මේනකොට දැන් නැව්
අපි දැන් අවසන් කරන්නේ අවසන්
නැව් ප්‍රමාද ගාස්තු ගෙවන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක නිසා දැන් නැව් ප්‍රමාද ගාස්තු ගෙවන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ ඩොලර් අර්බුදය නිසා මේනකොට
your question?
With the new measures that you unveiled today, how confident are you that you won't have to seek an IMF program this year?
We have rolled out an IMF program because I think these programs that we have initiated would work. Even if the IMF comes, what is the different program that they would be able to prescribe other than to say restructure your debt?
But at least you can blame the IMF for the pain that you inflict on
Sorry?
the people. At least you could blame the IMF for the pain that you would inflict on the people.
Thank you for that advice, but I don't think I'll take that.
So, but basically you're ruling it out.
No, I think why is it that you are keen to inflict pain on your investors who have trusted you and come? Do you know what would have been the situation had we defaulted, like what some people had proposed? Yes, as advised. Yesterday, we had a treasury bill auction at which 97 billion rupees was on auction and it was fully subscribed. If the day before we had defaulted, like as advised by some of these people, what would have been the state of that auction? What would have been the state of the ships that were coming? So you see, we have to understand that people can offer advice. They will say $500 million you must keep. $500 million out of a 21 billion of imports. What is the percentage? So would you rather sacrifice your entire economy than not hold back 500 billion? So that's why those have been considered carefully and then the decisions taken.
But I'm not asking about the default. The question is that you are now firmly ruling out any kind of IMF assistance going for...
No, what I can't understand is why you have only a fixation on the IMF. Don't you have an idea about the programs that we ourselves are implementing? Have you looked at those? Please look at those. If you look at those, you'll find that there is a huge amount of merit in those programs as well. So we are waiting for some unknown program than examining the program that you have before you. And most of the items that we have been talking about have been materializing. We talked about swaps; those are coming. We spoke about various country-to-country facilities. You have seen those announcements being made. So that is why I think we have to be also conscious that there is a program that is being implemented, and we don't need to have 2-3 different types of programs coming and then confusion being caused. So අපි සියලු දෙනාටම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා අද දින අපිත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ වෙලා මේ පණිවිඩය රටට ගෙන යාමට ඔබතුමාලා දරන ඒ උත්සාහය අපි සියලු දෙනාටම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙන ගමන්ම ඉදිරියේදීත් අපේ policy reviews වලට ඔබ සියලු දෙනාටම ආරාධනා කරන ගමන්ම ඔබතුමාට අද දින සහභාගී වීම ගැන ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා.